Good afternoon. My name is Joshua Waterman. I am the co-president of Coalition for a District Alternative. On behalf of CODA, Village Independent Democrats, Downtown Independent Democrats, New Downtown Democrats, Grand Street Democrats, United Democratic Organization, and Village Reform Democratic Club, I'd like to welcome you to our statewide candidate forum, part 1. Today, we'll be hearing from 4 incumbents seeking re-election for the positions of Attorney General, Lieutenant Governor, State Comptroller, and U.S. Senator. Each candidate is going to speak for about 5 minutes to be followed by a 15-minute Q&A period. Please use the chat or the Q&A feature built into Zoom to type your questions. The moderator will then read those questions. To be most efficient, we will not be calling on people to ask questions by voice. Just before we get underway, I'd like to thank my fellow Downtown Manhattan Club presidents you see here in front of you for organizing this event together. I'd like to thank the candidates and their teams for working with our schedule and giving us their time. And most importantly, of course, I'd like to thank all of you, the club members for whom we organized this event. Please join us same time, same place next week for our gubernatorial forum. We hope to see you then. And without anything further, I'd like to hand it off to Marian Rydell of Grand Street Democrats to introduce our first candidate today. Thank you.
Thank you, Joshua. Good morning, everyone. It's my deep pleasure to introduce our New York Attorney General, Letitia James, and I want to thank you particularly for being here today. I know you had a long, hard night. So the forum is that the format is that you get 5 minutes for presentation, and then we'll turn it over to questions and answers. All the questions will be asked by me because we're monitoring in the chat. So please.
Thank you, Marian. First, let me thank the Downtown Independent Democrats, the Coalition for a District Alternative, Village Independent Democrats, Grand Street Democrats, New Downtown Democrats, United Democrats, United Democratic Organization, and the Village Reform Democrats. Before I give my official remarks, I think we need to pause for a moment of silence on behalf of Officer Rivera and Officer Mora and Miss Michelle Go and Mr. Paul, 2 members of the AAPI community who were viciously attacked. Officer Mora has gone through surgery, and there are some reports that he's still in critical condition and other reports that he's in stable condition. But let us just pray for his full recovery. As Marian mentioned, I was at the hospital last night, and when they removed his body, the body of Officer Rivera, to hear the cries, the screams, the family of his family who spoke only in Spanish. He didn't have to know Spanish to understand their pain and their sorrow. And so I pray for him. I pray for his soul. I pray for his family. I pray for the full recovery of Officer Mora. I pray for the members of the AAPI community. And the message that I say today is that hate will not be tolerated anywhere in New York State. And an attack against one group is an attack against all of us. And let us all work together against gun violence and demand of our federal government that we have responsible gun control in this country. We've got to work harder and harder. This is the 5th officer who's been shot in our city in this month, and we are still in January. It is just outrageous and just beyond the pale. But thank you, because we're living in times that test our souls. A housing crisis, 17 people lost their lives in a horrific fire in the Bronx, choosing between heat and a space heater, individuals who have to choose between rent and food, a deadly pandemic that has taken our family members, our friends, wrecked our economy, and it forces parents to send their precious children to school without knowing that schools will be safe. We're still in a struggle for racial and social justice, a plague of gun violence and crime, the threat of climate change, a fight to protect our democracy, and one of the basic elements of our democracy, the right to vote, is under attack. So I'm running for Attorney General because there's a lot of work to be done. a lot of work to be done. And as most of you know, it's work that you and millions of New Yorkers have taken on. I took office 3 years ago, 3 years and a month, with the simple commitment: 1, to be unbossed and unbought; 2, to use the law as both a sword and as a shield; and 3, the simple message that the law applies to all of us, no matter your title, your station in life, or no matter how powerful you may think you are, the law applies to all of us. And I've been guided by these principles. One, as someone who has worked in my beloved Brooklyn, as someone who's been a public defender, someone who has been a city council member, and so now as Attorney General. I took on Big Pharma for its role. Wonderful attorneys in my office who I work with side by side, they joined with me as we took on Big Pharma. We filed the most comprehensive lawsuit against Big Pharma in regards to the opioid crisis, and we recovered and negotiated $1.5 billion for New Yorkers, which will go across the state of New York to address this pandemic and the funds. And I want to thank members of the legislature who might be on today for placing those funds in a lockbox for beds and prevention and for treatment, and for education. We also, as you know, I'm sure you've been reading the paper, we're involved in a litigation against Donald Trump and his family members for basically fraud. We have also sued to dissolve the NRA for years of self-dealing and financial greed. We've taken on big tech for monetizing your privacy and for engaging in antitrust violations. And last but not least, we've been standing up, defending our democracy, ensuring our right to vote is protected at home and across this nation, standing up for a woman's right to choose, which is under attack, and standing up for the members of the LGBT community as well. And we've also taken action against those individuals who were engaged in sexual harassment at the workplace, whether they be construction companies, individuals in the restaurant business, government workers, etc. No one should be subjected to unwanted advances from unwanted advances, from offensive conduct, and for touching individuals, which is in violation of the law. And those individuals should be held accountable no matter who they are. It's important that we all ensure that the air we breathe, the water that we all drink, and that our environment in general, and that we have clean energy, the planet that we all live on, that we protect it and safeguard it. Environmental justice for the people in places mostly affected by pollution. We need to stand up and defend their rights. As the Attorney General, I will continue to use my platform, my voice, and my passion to guarantee security, justice, basic food and shelter, education, and dignity for all New Yorkers and for all individuals who are marginalized and vulnerable, not only in New York, but across this country. I look forward to working with each and every one of you and I thank you for your continued leadership, your partnership, and your voices. And thank you for joining with me to make this nation and this world a more perfect union. Let us all stand together against hate. Let us all stand together in prayer for those who have lost their lives. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And thank you, of course, answered a lot of the things we might have asked of you. I'd like to start, actually, I would like to start with the question about gun control. And given the federal status of gun control, what can your office do? And we've had a horrific year regarding gun violence. And one of my brothers are retired NYPD. This is very close to home for me. So yeah. What can the AG's office do? What can you do, sorry, about given the status, what can you do to reduce gun violence in the state?
A couple of things. First, as the Attorney General, in the last 3 years, we have removed over 2,600 guns through gun buybacks. We provide resources to individuals, and two, we provide them with much needed services, and we do those gun buybacks with local law enforcement all across the state. 2,600 guns we've removed too. I have a number of, I have a criminal unit where I have a number of detectives who engage in takedowns of gangs and who take down individuals who are engaging in gun smuggling and drug trafficking. And we've done a number of takedowns all across state, again, working with law enforcement. In fact, we're working on one as we speak, where we are issuing warrants as of this moment and waiting for a response and arresting someone who we suspect is engaging in gun trafficking and basically carrying guns across state lines. And this individual that we are focusing on right now is in the midst of purchasing guns in Maryland and bringing them here back to New York State. And we plan on, again, meeting him at the, when he passes to New York State and to effect an arrest. 3, as you know, the New York State Legislature passed a law which basically would allow the Office of Attorney General in New York State to bring an action against any gun manufacturer and any gun distributor. As we all know, gun distributors and gun manufacturers enjoy right now immunity from lawsuits. And that was what the federal government has provided individuals. And so they enjoy immunity, they benefit from immunity. And what we need, and as far as I'm concerned, product liability should apply to gun manufacturers and gun distributors. But unfortunately, because of the federal government, they are not. The state legislature in New York made a carve out, an exception, and they passed a law last year which would allow me to bring an action against gun manufacturers and gun distributors who engage in negligence. So we're going to test this law. The NRA has already filed a lawsuit to declare it unconstitutional, basically arguing that this area of law, that states are preempted by the federal government by that immunity law. But I am in the midst of packaging a case, developing certain facts where I will hold a gun manufacturer liable. And I'm hoping that we will be successful. 75% of the guns that we recover in New York State come from outside of New York State. There are no gun manufacturers in New York State, well, not in New York City. And so the vast majority of these guns come from out of state. The gun that was used to kill Officer Rivera last night was a stolen gun from Maryland. The gun that was used to kill the 2 officers in Brooklyn several years ago, that gun came from out of state. They come along I-95, the Iron Pipeline. We're joining with other states to engage in gun tracing and establish a task force so that we can share information and we can work together with respect to gun trafficking, not only along I-95, the Iron Pipeline, but in New York State as well.
Thank you very much. Thank you. What lessons? So you've had an incredible background, and your prior term as Attorney General. What have you learned that's going to inform this next term and maybe make things better or to change things?
So I am, as everyone knows, I am an activist at heart, and I use the law both as a sword and as a shield. I was raised on the issue of social justice, and the state legislature several years ago expanded the jurisdiction of the Office of Attorney General, and now the Attorney General is responsible for investigating all police-related shootings in the state. And the vast majority of the shootings that are done by police officers, unfortunately, involve individuals who are struggling with mental illness. Our police are poorly equipped to deal with individuals who are struggling with mental illness. And we need more professionals, more mental health professionals to be partnered with law enforcement so that we can provide individuals who are in the throes of mental illness time and space and the ability to connect with someone who they know and someone who they trust and love. And that is what probably one of the most unfortunate parts of what I do as the Attorney General. I also have been very much involved in working with advocates all across the state to deal with housing needs, whether they're in Rochester or Buffalo, or in Saratoga or in Hudson County, and in New York City and on Long Island. We've been focusing a lot on poverty. There's a significant amount of abject poverty in upstate New York. There are transit deserts and food deserts. And I know that we can do better as the state of New York. And so it's been my honor and my privilege to work with all of the professionals on my staff, but they have been charged with, again, weeding out and focusing on social justice and trying to improve the lives of countless number of New Yorkers and to defend us. During the last administration, the previous administration, it was basically New York and California as bookends defending our democracy. We filed 76 cases against the former administration. A significant number of those cases had to do with protecting the rights of immigrants, reproductive rights, our environment, the LGBTQ community, on and on and on. And all of the cases that we filed against the Trump administration, we won 80% of our cases, again, working with New York on one side, California on the other. And I had no idea that when I was elected the Attorney General of the great state of New York, that I would be cast into the spotlight. But all of the clubs that are on this call today prepared me. New Yorkers prepared me. My training at Howard University prepared me, and my commitment to standing up for injustice basically has steeled me, provided a steel in my backbone to stand up to those who would turn back the clock of progress.
Thank you. There's
Thank
a
you.
question here about making 5 World Trade Center 100% affordable. There's a growing movement downtown and across the state to do that. 100% affordability building, giving priority to 9/11 families, first responders, and survivors. And the question is, will you be willing to meet with the group to learn how we can make this proposal feasible without siphoning other affordable housing funds from other projects?
So as you know, when I attended the downtown Independent Democrats organization, a number of individuals approached me with respect to this project. I will use my voice. This is primarily a legislative proposal, but if there's anything that I can do to promote true affordable housing for low-income families all across the city and or state, I am available in that regards. We have brought a number of cases against landlords who have violated 421A laws, developers and landlords who have violated the human rights of individuals, violated the rights of tenants. And so anyone who knows me knows that obviously I'm committed to protecting tenants and to providing more affordable housing, particularly given the fact that we are seeing more and more homeless people on the streets of New York. We particularly need more housing for individuals who are struggling with mental illness. And we cannot accept not in my backyard anymore. We need to have affordable housing, supportive housing in every corner of New York City, in every neighborhood in New York City. And if that includes 5 World Trade Center, then so be it. And then sign me up. It's really critically important that we have the homeless, individuals struggling with mental illness, and individuals right now, particularly children who are living in these shelters, have a permanent home.
Thank you. It's a question about your support. How can you support people with disabilities? Their employment for able people with disabilities is 31.6%.
Yeah, I'm aware of that. And so we're looking at some disability cases. I have hired a number of individuals who struggle, who are disabled on the staff of the Attorney General. It's really critically important that people understand that the civil rights law also applies to those who are disabled in the state. And so we are looking at bringing some disability cases, access cases, which is really critical to the mobility of individuals in the state of New York.
Thank you. What activities have you participated in last year to benefit our communities? 74th Assembly District, I'll add 65th Assembly District, basically the downtown communities.
We've been, again, all of the cases that I have been involved in as the Attorney General of the state of New York benefits each and every assembly district in the state of New York. Cases that involve clean air, clean water, clean energy, cases that involve reproductive rights, cases that involve disability, cases that involve housing. All of the cases and more, again, impact and will improve the lives of individuals in every and all assembly district all throughout the state of New York. And clearly, defending New York State against the previous administration benefited all of us. As someone who has defended our democracy, the rights of immigrants, the rights of New Yorkers, when the previous administration wanted to basically designate New York as an anarchist state, we challenged that. When he wanted to remove funds from New York State, we challenged that. And the list goes on and on of all of the efforts that the previous administration engaged in to try to hurt New Yorkers. We were successful in beating him back, and we'll do it again each and every time that individuals, no matter how powerful they are, seek to reverse the clock of progress.
Thank you. So what policies do you think can decrease the rate of incarceration while maintaining a sense of safety for the public?
You're absolutely right. So it's a delicate balance, and I do not believe that we should criminalize mental illness or poverty. And I know that there has been a lot of calls to revisit the bail reform law. And I am examining the data in a dispassionate way to see how many individuals have engaged in recidivism. People are responding to headlines. People are highly emotional with respect to bail laws, but we really need to look at the data. And I will be examining the data. I do know that as a chief law enforcement officer, one thing that I would like to review with the state legislature is discovery laws, because they have been challenging in our efforts to address gun violence and to address individuals who would violate the law. And so that is what really is critically important. I also think that we should, I support a law which would allow elderly individuals who pose no threat to New Yorkers, that they be given some clemency and a reduction of their sentence as well and be released. And I think punitive segregation is something that we should also be examining in the state of New York and throughout the city of New York. And we should also, again, revisit Rikers Island. Rikers Island, again, I support the closing of Rikers Island at this point in time, and look forward to alternatives to incarceration, including but not limited to restorative justice.
Thank you very much. This is a quick one. So will you be endorsing a candidate in the primary for governor? And are you
I haven't made a
willing to tell
decision with
us?
respect. I haven't made a decision with regards to the primary in regard the Democratic primary for the office of governor as of yet.
Okay, thank you. We have 2 seconds left. So I want to thank you for your participation and for your work. And I hope you have a really good luck in your candidacy.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you all. Thank you all. Let's stand together as we continue to fight for justice, and let us continue to pray for all of those who lost their lives. Thank you.
Thank you, Attorney General. Here comes the Lieutenant Governor.
Is the Lieutenant Governor with us?
I am here, but I can't start my video because you have stopped it.
All right, so you have to elevate him to host.
You should be good to go now.
Okay.
Oh.
So for those who joined us late, just welcome everybody to the Downtown Democratic 2022 Primary Candidate Forum. My name is Denny Salas, and I'm the political and policy co-chair of UDO, the United Democratic Organization. We're here to welcome Lieutenant Governor Brian Benjamin to this forum. Just as a reminder, for each segment, candidates will give a 5-minute presentation, followed by a 15-minute Q&A. During the Q&A, pre-submitted member questions will be asked by the moderator, after which questions will be taken from the floor. For the audience, if you have a question for the candidate, please use the chat function, and questions will be taken in the order they are submitted. Lieutenant Governor, the floor is yours. Please begin with your 5-minute introduction.
Thank you so much for having me here today. I want to thank you for hosting this forum and for your activism in helping to make New York City and Manhattan in particular a better place. I want to thank the Village Independent Democrats, the United Democratic Organization, Grand Street Democrats, the Downtown Independent Democrats, New Downtown Dems, the Coalition for a District Alternative, and the Village Reform Democrats for hosting us here today. Let me just share a little bit about me personally and why I'm running. My name is Brian Benjamin. I'm the proud son of 2 immigrants. My mother came to this country from Guyana, my stepdad from Jamaica. They worked hard to provide a better life for me and my family. And because of their hard work, I was able to go to Brown University, Harvard Business School, and then come back to build 100% affordable housing right here in New York City as part of a minority-owned business in our community. Then I ran for New York State Senate to better serve our communities and advocate for important issues in Albany. In the Senate, I helped to focus on some very key issues. First, helping to pass legislation and the tenant support in support of tenants to keep rent-controlled apartments affordable, helping make sure seniors could afford their rent. I defended public pensions for hardworking public servants like my own parents, and introduced legislation that successfully pushed New York State to divest from private and for-profit prisons. That was particularly in the Comptroller's office with those funds. And I'm really proud that I was able to introduce and pass the Eric Garner Anti-Chokehold Act, which was an important step to end excessive force by police in New York City. Very proud to work with Governor Hochul to balance this question between public safety and fairness. It is something that we've been dealing with. Yes, last night I was at Harlem Hospital for a really tragic moment, as we all know about the recent attacks on our police officers, and just the increase in crime generally. And there are very important conversations that we are having that we must have as a community about how we make this balance work. What I do believe very strongly is that over-incarceration is not the answer. We must focus very much on ensuring that anyone who is incarcerated, it's for a public safety purpose, but more importantly, that we do everything we can to provide the intervention and prevention resources in our communities to make sure that we are reducing the amount of individuals who might turn themselves to crime. Our education system requires our resources. We are spending, or we're putting in our budget, $31.3 billion, which is a record for in this state for education across the state. But how are we ensuring that, particularly in communities where there is significant poverty, that young people are getting the education that they need, they're getting the skills that they need, they're getting the mental health services that they need, they're getting the guidance counseling that they need. Those are specific priorities that we must do in order to help reduce some of the concerns that we're seeing on our streets. We have been very focused in this administration on helping to protect affordable housing and provide more affordable housing. The governor has announced a $25 billion 5-year plan to create or preserve over 100,000 more units of affordable housing, 10,000 of which will be for those who need supportive housing. And particularly, we're focusing on homeless housing for people who need it. We're also ending 421A, and we are replacing it, looking to replace it with a real affordable housing program that it provides more and deeper affordability across New York. Also, we are focusing very closely on trying to help with the future of our small businesses. So many small businesses were hurt during the pandemic, and they are the lifeblood of most of our communities, hiring locally, helping to provide sort of support for local communities. They are the backbone of our economy, and they need support. So some of the things that we're looking to do in the budget is provide over $100 million in relief for nearly 200,000 small businesses. We want to accelerate some middle-class tax cuts of about $1.2 billion for over 6 million New Yorkers, and make childcare more affordable in New York for working families who are trying to get by, trying to provide access to over 100,000 more working families so that people can have their children protected while they work. We also have been dealing with the COVID-19 pandemic. And, there's so many essential workers who have done the hard work to keep us safe. And we want to make sure that they are not only incentivized and given bonuses, but that we're providing more resources to help grow the field, because there's just going to be that need. So we're investing $10 billion to help grow the healthcare workforce by 20% over the next 5 years, and provide wages and bonuses, higher wages and bonuses for those healthcare workers who have really been fighting the good fight for New Yorkers over the last few years during this pandemic. And then let me say,
we're going to get to questions, Lieutenant Governor. That was 5 minutes, so we really appreciate it. That's great.
okay, I was going to make one quick point about ethics reform, real quick. We're introducing a constitutional amendment to limit statewide elected officials to 2 terms and ban earned outside income for these offices. We were reflecting the federal model. Thank you. Sorry about that.
No, that's all good. All right, thank you very much. All right, so we have a few questions. The first one. There was a 361% rise in Asian hate crimes over the last year in New York City, with recent visuals highlighting these violent incidents with the loss of Michelle Alyssa Go and Yao Pan Ma. What specific public safety measures are the executive branch prepared to enact to keep our Asian American friends, family, and neighbors safe?
So a couple things. First, I am a big believer in prevention, and so a lot of the focus of where we are is dedicated to that. So number one, we're providing over $400 million to help those who are dealing with the opioid crisis. We think addiction and mental health is a real issue that's helping to drive homelessness, and not only that, drive some of the issues that we're seeing in our streets. And so we're spending those resources to focus on that. We're bringing out special operating support teams that are going to be working alongside with the city to work with the homeless to try to provide people with the support that they need to get housing assistance, mental health assistance, et cetera. I was at Michelle Go's, the vigil on her behalf. And one of the things that I mentioned there was that the sister of the perpetrator talked about how her brother was a fine young man when he was young. He was growing, working hard, playing by the rules, trying to do the things he needed to do. And then when he hit his mid-30s, he had a mental breakdown. He had something snapped. And they tried to get him support. They took him to hospitals. They tried to get him committed. And the system never facilitated that. Under our budget and what we're looking to do in New York State, we're figuring out how to ensure that people can get the support they need when they need it, so that we don't have people in the streets. And quite frankly, permanent supportive housing is the answer. We're spending a significant part of the $25 billion in our budget to help grow supportive housing. We have to do more of that because people need to have a stable place. The shelters are not working. And we need to move people from shelters into permanent supportive housing, and that I think will play a major role here. And quite frankly, when it comes to just the issues of what's happening, particularly to our Asian brothers and sisters, we're going to keep speaking out. We're going to keep fighting the good fight. And for those who commit acts, particularly against Asians as part of a hate crime, we're going to make sure that they're held accountable.
So thank you. All right, second question. In the recent budget proposal released by the governor's office, there is an allocation of $150 million for public housing outside of New York City. With a $40 billion shortfall to repair existing NYCHA buildings, why is there no mention of any funding from the state being allocated to much needed repairs, where recently several housing projects in the Lower East Side went without heat and hot water for days and weeks?
Good question. So first of all, we have been expecting through the Build Back Better program nearly $30 billion that we knew what are in there for NYCHA that the federal government would help fund, and we understand that. As we know, that has been a challenge, and there are talks about how that's going to get broken down into other pieces. So that's one thing. Secondly, we're having conversations on this, but there is a proposal by NYCHA that will help convert the Section 9 vouchers that are there into Section 8 vouchers, which will unleash at least upfront about $6 billion and ultimately possibly $18 billion. There's a lot of conversations, a lot of issues around that, how we do that, some concerns with tenant leaders, but know that we are working on that. And we have a plan for that. We're just trying to figure it out. And so putting it it's not ready to be in the budget at this time.
Okay, thank you. Number 3, we are a week and a half away from Lunar New Year. Pre-pandemic, Chinatown was bustling with foot traffic that contributed enormously to the local economy and helped numerous small businesses. That is no longer the case. What is the state prepared to do to help the local economy in Chinatowns all over the state?
Sure. So we are, as I was trying to mention earlier, we are spending at least $100 million to help some of our small businesses who have been impacted by COVID, to provide them with support so that they can help, so we can move forward on some of the things that they need to do. We are also very much trying to bring COVID to its knees. We have been spending billions of dollars focusing on COVID recovery. I believe very strongly that if we can get through COVID, it will help to unleash the economy. And then when you combine that with people feeling safe, traveling on the trains, et cetera, that will really kind of get tourism moving again, bring people more into the country and moving around, which will help the local economy. And so we are trying to deal with helping our small businesses on the ground who are hurting, providing tax cuts where appropriate to assist, dealing with COVID-19 to make people feel more comfortable traveling, and then also addressing the public safety issue. So there'll be more movement across the state into Chinatown.
Excellent. Thank you. So another question. With Roe versus Wade likely being overturned, what other policies can the state of New York implement to ensure that we are a safe haven for women's health and women out of state who may come to the state for their reproductive health?
Well, as you know, we did pass the Reproductive Health Act, which basically codified Roe v. Wade here in New York. We did that under our Senate Democratic leadership and working alongside with the governor and the assembly. So we are a safe haven on that front. We're looking to pass an Equal Rights Amendment as well, and also make sure that women are getting getting paid equal pay for equal work. So we are continuing to be a place where that is possible. And quite frankly, we now have the first female governor in the history of New York State, who I believe is doing a great job and is very committed to ensuring that we do everything we can to make sure women know that that New York State is a place where they can, their bodies are theirs and they can make decisions, and we will support that.
Thank you. Next question. What policies are the state proposing to prepare our citizens for the economy of today?
Good question. So number one, we're going to be spending $10 billion to invest in our healthcare workforce. There is going to continue to be an increased need for healthcare workers. It is essential that we look all across the state and provide people with opportunities to enter the workforce and give them the wage and bonuses that they need. That's number one. Number two, we're dealing with a serious teacher shortage. The majority of our teachers are over 55. And as we move forward and we think about, the future of education, we need to have a continuous pipeline of teachers. So we are investing in more teachers, and we're also looking to have the teacher certification process be more streamlined. And that is something that's very important. And thirdly, we're spending significant resources on workforce development. I believe very strongly that as we bring in the infrastructure money that's coming in from the federal government, we're going to be doing so many projects in New York State. Who's going to be building those roads? Who's going to be building those bridges, those tunnels? I live in Harlem, and the Second Avenue subway is going to go from 96th Street to 125th Street. So much public housing, so much poverty right in that neighborhood. How are we ensuring that the young people who live in those developments are going to be able to build those tunnels? That's part of what we want. We're going to be investing in workforce development, and we have hundreds of millions of dollars going towards that. And as we move towards 100% renewable energy in New York State, that's going to be so much shift in jobs. Building of the wind turbines. We are investing $500 million into offshore wind. We're investing millions of dollars to ensure that we are creating climate-friendly homes, solar panels on rooftops. So many jobs that is going to create. We have to make sure that the kids and the young people who have been historically left on the sidelines, who possibly could end up in a life of crime, that they get the skills and the opportunities and the training so that they can be building the future that we're trying to create right here in New York State.
Thank you. Next question. The state has committed $10 million to provide the Asian American community organizations with funding to combat Asian hate crimes, but those funds have not been dispersed. What is a timeline for the state to actually release those funds?
Well, I will come back to you shortly on that, because I will personally make calls to see where that is. We need to get that money out the door. So if there's anything I can do, one of the things that the lieutenant governor is able to be is an advocate on particular issues. And for me, this is a priority issue, and it's something that I spoke to significantly with Senator John Liu. I was part of the process to make sure that $10 million was allocated in the first place, working with him and Assembly Member Yulene New and others to stand with the community to ensure that those resources were in the budget. So I will do what I can to make sure that they're dispersed, and I will connect with you afterwards to see what's happening on that.
Okay, excellent. And this is more of a getting to know you question.
Sure.
What was a catalyst for you to get involved in politics?
Sure. So I grew up watching Meet the Press with my mother, who worked at a labor union her whole life, and we watched Meet the Press. And I've attended every Democratic convention since I've been born, mainly because she always went with Local 372, D37, and I always loved civic engagement, fighting for the rights of union workers, people like my parents who are hardworking New Yorkers who played by the rules, and we want to make sure that they're treated well. And when President Obama ran, well, then Senator Obama ran for president, it really sparked something in me, and I decided to really engage more deeply and create a group called Harlem for Obama that helped to get him votes in Harlem, and then things took off from there. I joined my local community board, got involved, and was building affordable housing, and then I was able to in 2017 get elected to the New York State Senate, and it's been amazing to be able to serve my community the way I have.
Excellent. Here's another question. So, what policies currently exist in the state government, and what further can be done to control criminal gangs and gun control in the state?
So that's a good question. First, we have some of the toughest gun laws in the country. I will say to you, and I'm gonna take a different tact on this because I think it's important. I believe that what we need the most is to focus on the individuals themselves. We can have as many laws as we want, and we have a lot. But if we're not dealing with some of the issues of poverty and some of our community, some of the issues of mental health in our community. In our budget, we are proposing $234 million to invest in our community-based Cure Violence Interrupters. These are primarily organizations that have in them individuals who might have had issues in the past with the law, who have credibility in the streets, who can help us figure out how to reduce tensions, how to provide opportunities to young people. We have been spending money. When I was in the Senate, we spent money to help small businesses who are made up of people who were formerly incarcerated. The governor has a Jails to Jobs program to help reduce recidivism. I mean, when people come out of jail, 42% go back in 3 years. So how are we creating the opportunities, helping to reacclimate people to society, helping to create economic opportunities, small businesses for people? I think we have to really take a look at the individuals themselves and provide them with resources and support so that they have a real alternative to a harsh life. Now, with that being said, when you come to talking about mega cartels and gangs, et cetera, we are very active. I've been asked by the governor to help lead a gun tracing consortium working alongside with the New York State Police and the NYPD and neighboring law enforcement agencies to track some of these illegal guns. As you know, we don't make guns in New York State, they're coming from elsewhere. But I don't think you can only focus on the weapons themselves and the laws themselves. You have to focus on the people themselves and the prevention measures that we should be implementing and really focusing on to give people opportunities for alternative lifestyles that can lead to a culture that does not continue to facilitate the gun violence that we're seeing.
Thank you, Lieutenant Governor. That concludes a portion of your forum. We thank you for taking the time to speak with us. And I will now be handing this off to Michael Kramer of the new Downtown Dems. And thank you for your time, Lieutenant Governor.
Thank you for having me.
Mara is going to take the Comptroller.
Hi, thank you. Can somebody elevate Mr. DiNapoli?
I elevated up to panelists. You just have to give them host permissions.
Okay.
I think I just unmuted. I'm trying to hit the video, but it doesn't seem to be.
Yeah, no, give it a second. There you go.
Should be good now.
Okay, let's see. Yeah, how's that? How's that?
Hello.
Hello.
Hi. Hello, my name is Mara Fitzgerald. Cameron Krause and I are the presidents of VID, Village Independent Democrats. Welcome, Mr. DiNapoli, to the New York State Comptroller portion of today's candidate forum. We're going to begin with a 5-minute presentation from you, followed by 15 minutes of Q&A from our joint club members. And just as a reminder, if you have a question for a candidate, please write it in the Q&A. Preference will be given to members of the host clubs who have not yet had an opportunity to ask questions. Mr. DiNapoli, your 5 minutes starts now.
Okay, thank you very much. Thanks to all the club members who are on this call. It's great to be with all of you. Sorry it's virtual, but that's the world that we have to live through today. I'll try to do it in a New York 5 minutes. Always a lot to talk about with the work that we do in the Comptroller's office. But suffice it to say, it's an honor and a privilege to serve as the New York State Comptroller, which is why I am seeking to continue in this position for another 4-year term. I got some good news this morning. Andy Pilata, the head of New York State United Teachers, called to say that NYSET has endorsed my candidacy. We'll be getting a lot of labor endorsements over the past couple of weeks. The building trades came out this week. CSEA was last week, PEF before that, and more coming. But certainly having the support of our Democratic clubs is very, very important to me. So I certainly will upfront ask for your collective and individual endorsements, because you are the men and women who get the word out to our rank and file Democrats. And that's going to be very important in this election year, certainly especially important for us to get a big vote out of Manhattan. I've had the privilege to be in public service for a number of years. I started out, as some of you know, as a trustee on my local Board of Education, spent 2 decades in the state legislature in the state assembly, and had the chance in 2007 to become state controller. State controller job is a great job, an important job. It's probably a job that most folks don't have a strong sense about what we do. But we have a lot to do with the basic operations of state government, approving contracts, doing payments, getting the pension checks out. And in this era where people are especially concerned about transparency and accountability, that's very much the bread and butter of the work that we do. We do that through our audit work of state agencies particularly, but certainly local governments as well. We do it with our reports. You know, certainly in the COVID environment, we've had a particular responsibility, although most of our workforce has been working remotely. We started bringing people back, and obviously with Omicron, we had to go backwards a little bit. But my team has really done a great job of getting us through this tough time, working closely with other agencies, particularly in the beginning of the health emergency, to get personal protective equipment, ventilators, and so on board. And we continue to be working in a very efficient way. We're focused now on recovery and trying to do the kind of reports and analysis that will help us all get to a stronger position. We focus particularly on the New York City economy because that's so important to the strength of our state. So some of you may have seen, we just did an update on some of our reports on the restaurant, retail, and recreation sector, still down about 170,000 jobs in New York City. We did a report on the rent relief program showing how slow New York was to do those payments. We update on a monthly basis our subway ridership dashboard so people can look to see in their own neighborhood what's been the return as far as use of the subways and the trains. Always do MTA reports, reports on the state budget. We're working on that now that the governor has presented her budget, the New York City budget. A lot of our reports try to be impactful. You know, we're not a policy shop, right? We don't make law and make decisions, but we did a report on broadband back in the late fall that showed there's still 1 million households in New York that don't have access to broadband. Last week, we did a report on aging individuals who are incarcerated in our state prison system to really suggest there needs to be some additional policy initiatives there. We've done reports on immigration. We audits, you know, just this week, we did a series of audits on services for aging New Yorkers, both in New York City and New York State, showing some need for improvement there. One of the big areas we work on is the state pension fund. I'll mention it quickly so I stay within our 5 minutes. I'm very proud of the fact that New York State's pension fund is the best funded state pension plan in the country, over 99% funded. So the retirement security for our 1.1 million members is there. We take that responsibility very seriously. We also are very mindful of being an active shareholder, so we engage our corporations on a host of issues, be it climate, trying to deal with the issue of reducing greenhouse gas emissions. We have a particular initiative on disability inclusion, so more disabled people can find jobs in the corporate environment. Political spending disclosure, especially in the wake of Citizens United and the January 6th insurrection. We have a new emphasis on diversity, equity, and inclusion. Number of shareholder proposals calling for independent racial equity audits, following up on what we tried to do at Amazon last year. We're going back to Amazon and some additional corporations in that regard. And I'm very pleased that we have
DiNapoli, that's 5 minutes.
Okay, I'll just mention my closeout sentence is our program for having more capital be managed by women and minority firms. We're up to $27 billion now under management by minority firms, firms of color, and women-owned firms.
Thank you so much. We have some questions. Pete Davies asks, to support small businesses who are often priced out of what is now an overly speculative real estate market, will you act for the creation of a rent transparency data bank of actual income for spaces versus asking rent as market anchor in order to create more market stability and give prospective tenants a more accurate indication of what rents are sustainable in a given area?
It sounds like an interesting idea. I'm not sure that our shop is the place to do something like that, but if he would get me a little more information, I will certainly see if it's appropriate for us or make a suggestion as to who would be the ones to do something like that.
Thank you. The next question is from Mariama James. It is adding that a luxury tower on public land providing public subsidies to a private developer in an already segregated community. I guess the question is, do you think that adding a luxury tower on public land providing public subsidies to a private developer in an already segregated community is effectively redlining and potentially a violation of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which prohibits discrimination on public land?
Well, needless to say, I'm opposed to discrimination, opposed to redlining. This sounds like a specific instance, though. So I'm not familiar with the exact property that the questioner is asking about. And my guess is that the subsidy would either be, I don't know whether it's a federal, a state, or a local subsidy. Again, not in our purview. We don't authorize subsidies, in terms of our work. So probably a more appropriate question for, I'm assuming it's something in Manhattan, for your Manhattan representatives to give you an answer to, but I certainly don't think we should be supporting redlining or segregation. But again, I suspect there's a little more behind that question than that broad that broad umbrella that was laid out.
Yes, thank you. Bob Schneck asks, it's important to reduce crime and its causes at all levels. What will you do to reduce governmental corruption and white-collar crime in the state? And how can we return ill-gotten gains to the public?
Yeah. So what we've done going back a number of years is expand our investigations unit that is part of our counsel's office. And when Eric Schneiderman was the Attorney General, we set up a special joint task force on public integrity to really focus on the kind of crimes and abuse that is identified in your question. We've continued that collaboration with Attorney General Tish James. So what that unit does is respond to tips that we often get on our fraud hotline. They work in conjunction with our auditors. So sometimes our audits will turn up a case of wrongdoing, stealing. Very often it's a situation where either an elected official, appointed official, or head of a nonprofit using public money uses the public money for personal benefit. We just had an arrest in Cattaraugus County about a week and a half ago of an official with one of the fire departments up there that had scammed about $116,000 of money from the fire department. And unfortunately, we find this in many cases. What we also do is work in collaboration, not just with the Attorney General, but with local district attorneys, the U.S. Attorney, the FBI, and sometimes they contact us, because we have the resources of forensic auditors. So sometimes the prosecutors don't have the same audit capacity or resources that we have. So the bottom line is, since we started this initiative, we are now up to about, I think we're just shy of 250 arrests of some elected officials, some appointed, some working in nonprofits. We had a particular initiative on individuals abusing money allocated for special education purposes. We've gotten restitution now of about $80 million in taxpayer dollars. So, this is a continuing part of our work, and it's certainly an area where I've devoted more staff resources, both attorneys and forensic auditors, to work in partnership with law enforcement to hold people accountable and get money returned to the taxpayers.
Thank you. From Bill Ferns, what progress is your office making in completely divesting from firearms manufacturers?
Well, we did it about, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago. We divested from, we were in 2 gun manufacturers. We divested those holdings, and gun manufacturers are on a restricted list.
Thank you. Also from Mariama James. What are your thoughts on criminal cops losing their pensions or on those pensions being used toward payment of settlements in abuse and wrongful death claims?
For police officers? Was that the question? Police pensions?
Yeah, also, what are your thoughts on criminal cops losing their pensions or on those pensions being used toward payment of settlements in abuse and wrongful death claims?
Well, pensions, are protected. There was a constitutional amendment that applied to higher officials. They could be police officials. I don't think it would apply to rank and file police officers, where they could lose their pensions if they're convicted of a crime. I mean, to do a change broadly for all police officers would require a state constitutional amendment. I'm not sure that would be a likely, I don't know how doable that would be, quite frankly.
Okay, thank you. Fanny Ip would like to know, what actions would you take if the mayor overrides a non-registration of contract by your office due to not meeting the standards of your office?
Repeat that again. For non-registration?
What actions would you take if the mayor overrides a non-registration of contract by your office due to not meeting the standards of your office?
Okay, so again, keep in mind, I'm the state controller, not the city controller. So the mayor of New York City does not have to register contracts with my office. That is a New York City controller role, not state controller. So we don't have a role in that. It's a fair question. We're often confused between what we do versus what the city controller does, but the mayor doesn't register contracts with the state controller.
Thank you. Jill Goodkind would like to know, can your office tell us what type of tax breaks the potential developer of 5-World Trade will receive for including a minimum 25% affordable housing? 5-World Trade Center is state-owned property.
We could inquire about that. Yeah, if you wouldn't mind, when we're offline, just give me the details on that and we'll follow up.
Yeah, we'll be sure anything that required follow-up, we will put you in touch with your office.
Yeah, I think this is the second one, right? We had an earlier one, so we're up to 2.
Yeah. Let's see, we don't have any more questions and we have 7 minutes left. I do have a question though.
Sure.
So I saw that you audited back in 2019, the New York City DOE as far as discipline, but it was very specific to violent incidents and weapons. And as far as data, there are lots of data holes, particularly in New York City, where it pertains to race and socioeconomic status of students. Would you do anything to fill in the blanks of the disparities that exist within different groups, as far as the DOE is concerned, or statewide, New York State Education Department? Is that something you'd look into?
So just let me make sure I understand the question. So the question is, in an audit context, would we look at disparities in terms of
race and socioeconomic status of students?
Right. So disparities meaning in education outcomes, or
discipline, admissions, yes, educational outcomes, and all of that what that means.
Yeah, I mean, we've done a number of audits on SED and on New York City DOE. It tends not to look at pedagogical outcomes because our auditors don't have the don't necessarily have the skill to do that. But if you would give me an example of a kind of outcome that you would like us to look at, we could certainly consider that.
Sure, I will follow up with you.
Yeah.
All right, we have more questions now.
Mhm.
Bob Schneck asks, when and how does your office work in concert with the New York City Comptroller?
Well, we are, in a sense, on parallel tracks, right? So our responsibilities are similar, not the same. There are certain things under the city charter. The contract issue came up earlier, in terms of registering contracts, which is unique for them. We don't have that responsibility. What we do though at a staff level, because there are some areas where we have overlapping audit authority. There are some areas where the city controller has unique authority, other areas where the state controller has unique authority. What we try to do is coordinate our efforts so we're not doing double work. That's done, through staff communication between the various audit teams. We have a new controller. I started with Controller Bill Thompson, and have worked, with John Liu and Scott Stringer, and now Brad Lander. So Brad and I have been talking, and we're going to continue to be talking about ways that we can coordinate. What we have done over the years, we don't have anything in the pipeline right now, but we have had instances where we actually, I think we started this with John Liu. We put our audit teams together to do a joint audit. It had to do with New York City Transit and scheduling of construction work, as I recall. And we've had some other opportunities to do something like that. So I mean, fortunately for me, I've always had a great relationship with the individuals who have been New York City Controller, and I expect that to continue with Brad Lander as Controller. And the other area where we have often coordinated has been on corporate governance issues from the perspective of being shareholders through the pension funds. So very often you'll see shareholder resolutions, pressing corporations to do the right thing on a host of issues, are often jointly filed by New York State and New York City, or if not jointly filed, mutually supported. So that there are opportunities for us to work together.
So I have two more questions, and I think we have about 2 minutes. Grace Lee asks, do you support term limits on statewide officials?
Nope.
Okay. And Pete Davies asked, and I apologize if you've answered this already, kind of. It's purview question. Does the comptroller have authority over New York State licensing of real estate salespersons and brokers? This is in regard to the way that properties are marketed in relation to both local zoning and New York State law. And also another question regarding purview. Joshua believes there may be some misunderstanding. Can you give us a general overview of specific duties of city and state comptroller offices?
On the first one, the answer is no. On the second one, so the state controller is the chief financial officer for the state. We are in charge of approving all state contracts valued at $50,000 and more, which is most of the contracts. We process and monitor and look for any inappropriate expense as far as state payments. By that I mean money that's paid to vendors that are doing business with the state, state grants that are going to nonprofits, state aid that's going to New York City, or to local governments all across the state. So that state operations, we're very much the back office operation for the state of New York. The state controller, it's different than the city controller, is sole fiduciary for the state pension fund. So the state pension fund is for all state workers, wherever they live, including New York City, and for municipal workers outside of New York City, and for non-teaching educational employees. So what's different there is the city controller, while he hires the staff, manages the staff for investing the city pension funds. The city has 5 different pension funds, and they have 5 different boards. So the controller kind of coordinates it, but the city controller is different than the state controller, and that I'm a sole fiduciary versus managing 5 boards. But your pension fund obviously is a big responsibility. Both the city controller and the state controller have audit authority, although the city controller obviously is more limited in terms of city-specific agencies. There are some city agencies where I have authority to audit, some that I don't. And then I have audit responsibility for state agencies, in varying degrees, state public authorities, and local governments and school districts outside of New York City. We administer the oil spill fund, and we return people's lost money and unclaimed funds. That's unique to what we do rather than the city controller.
Thank you so much. And that was perfect timing. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks. It's great to be with all of you, and I hope I can look forward to your support.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye-bye. I am going to pass it over to Michael.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mar. Can we elevate Senator Schumer and put on his video?
I'm sorry, can I actually also just say VID members, since we have already endorsed for this office, feel free to stick around, but you know, we always love to hear from Senator Schumer, but thank you.
Thank you for your endorsement.
Okay. Thank you, Senator. Did you turn on your video?
Hold on. It said I couldn't a minute ago. Now I can. There I am. Okay.
Thank
good.
you. Nice to see you again.
Thanks.
We're doing a 5 minutes of a presentation and then 15 minutes of Q&A. So let's get right into the presentation, and anybody who has questions, please put them into the chat. Thank you, Senator.
I was told 10 minutes and 10, so maybe I'll be a little longer, but I'll leave as much time as you want for questions.
Use your best judgment. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. So first, I do want to thank all of the club presidents, Josh Waterman, Andrea Gordillo of Coalition for a District Alternative. I see a nice little yellow sign up there. Patrick Cannell and Michael Kramer, I've heard of him, of New Downtown Democrats, Richard Corman of Downtown Independent Democrats, Mark Fitzgerald, Cameron Krause. We just saw them. I was endorsed by them, so I guess they're not participating already. Marion Riddell of Grand Street Democrats, Chung Cito of United Democratic Organization, Raymond Klein of Village Reform Democrats, and all the district leaders. You know, I know all of you have jobs, you have family, you have a lot of things to do on a Saturday. The fact that you're here because you care about our city and our country, that's what America's all about. That gives me strength and faith that people care about this. Because, you know, just when people give up, that's when we really lose. And this is democracy in action. For those of you who don't know my history, I started out, my father was an exterminator, raised in Brooklyn, spent my whole life in Brooklyn. And where I grew up, I saw people, average families, working class families, just, you know, having a rough time. Tenants were facing rent increases and getting no heat, seniors who really suffered in terms of affordable drugs and resources. The subways were a mess. My people then took the D train, my community, which was then the D train into the city. So I was resolved to try and solve them and solve these problems. I became assemblyman at age 23. And as I rose up through the ranks of elected service, the problems have gotten bigger. But my passion for helping people who need help, poor people, working people, has, if anything, gotten even stronger. And that's what motivates me. And that's why I'm always out and about and not just sitting at a desk or in Washington all the time. Let me start out with a brief word on voting rights. I'm sure that's on everybody's mind. We are continuing the fight, folks. We're going to win this fight. Obviously, the results were disappointing, but we're better off having had the vote. I had all these, you know, Beltway pundits. Don't call a vote because you don't have the votes. NFW, as they say in Brooklyn. Our job is to vote. And this is one of the most serious, if not the most serious issue facing us. Everyone should go on the record. And the fact that we voted, we're better off today than we were before the vote. First, everyone got to see where everyone was. All America's going to see, what are the Republicans for? A very unpopular word, filibuster. And all but 2 Democrats voted to change the rules. And that is a big change in itself. If you would have surveyed our Democratic caucus back in a year ago, January, maybe you'd have 20 who were for changing the rules. Now we have 48. And we're going to keep at this. We'll need all of you to keep at it. We're going to continue to put pressure in West Virginia and in Arizona. And you're going to see further actions on the floor of the Senate on voting rights. So keep up the fight. It's too important not to. Our democracy is at risk. And it's not just a voting rights bill, but it's also dealing with fair reapportionment and getting dark money out of politics. The Republican Party is fueled by a massive amount of dark money. I just see it in all the attacks that they're able to do. And I see them, I see the attacks on me all the time by a whole panoply of hard right, dark money groups. So we are going to keep fighting, and we're going to win this fight. I get inspiration from Martin Luther King and John Lewis. They had tough fights. They didn't stop. And they didn't always have success. Racism is the poison of America. The people, I just read Grant's biography. And the white Southerners, when the newly freed black slaves were newly freed black people who had been slaves, the number one thing they wanted to deprive them of was the vote. The vote meant power. More than job, more than property was the vote. And it's still that way. So many of these rules are directed at people of color, at poor people, at young people, at disabled people. And we're going to have to keep fighting. We're going to keep fighting. Lewis, King are inspirations. Frankly, my father is. He passed away 2 months ago. But he always taught me, if you keep fighting and to do the right thing, you'll succeed. And he's sitting right here. I don't know if any of you have lost a parent, but he's still here. He's professing that to me. Okay, so that's voting rights. And let me go through some of the good things that happened in the last year. We passed some of the most progressive legislation in decades. The American Rescue Plan put money in the pockets of poor people and working people through direct payments and unemployment insurance. Half the kids were taken out of poverty. We have to expand that. The child tax credit, we are trying to expand. We enhanced unemployment insurance, and for the first time had part-time workers, gig workers, freelance workers there. I delivered 300, I had to fight for this. The Republicans were dead against it, state and local aid. It kept our city going, and it funded the schools and the workers, and it provided $2 billion of rent relief. We had an excluded workers fund that's been used by the governor to help our immigrants. One of the things I'm proudest of was Save Our Stages. You have a lot of people who depend on the arts. It's all closing down. Not only Broadway, but all the little independent arts venues that are so important to the quality of life in the communities you represent and in New York City. And I made sure that all of them got help. They would have gone under because they were the first to close, last to open, because large numbers of people gathered. We got money for the schools, saved the subway system. And I am passionate about mass transit. We got more money for the MTA than ever. And they not only have money now, the governor's using it all to not only prevent the fare from being raised and prevent cutbacks in service, but to actually expand. To expand the 2nd Avenue subway up into the desert of East Harlem. I just created an agreement between Amtrak and the MTA, so the East Bronx, another desert of working people, of people of color, will get real transit, another transit desert, etc. Another thing we've been able to accomplish that I'm very proud of is diversifying the criminal justice system. Donald Trump put the most I'm trying to talk fast here, Michael. Donald Trump put the most reprehensible people on the bench. Not only hard right in philosophy, but many of them are not honorable people and had no empathy, as a judge is supposed to have, for people who come before them. We are rectifying that. I have put more people on the bench, more Democratic nominees on the bench than any first-year presidency since Ronald Reagan. The majority are women, the majority are people of color, and not only is it demographic diversity, it is for the first time professional diversity. It's not just prosecutors and lawyers from big firms. Let me give you some examples if you don't know them. Myrna Perez, daughter of Mexican immigrants, one of the experts in voting rights in the country, the first Latina confirmed to the federal bench since our bench since Sonia Sotomayor to the Second Circuit. And I'm proud, by the way, I recommended Sonia Sotomayor to President Obama. I put her and pushed her to get on the bench there. There's Eunice Lee, for an African-American woman. First, we don't have an African-American woman on our Second Circuit. She was the former head of the federal defenders of New York. Allie Nathan, brilliant judge in the Southern districts, will be the second open lesbian ever confirmed. Nusrat Chowdhury from the Eastern District, a civil rights attorney at the ACLU, first Bangladeshi ever on the federal bench, second Muslim on the bench. Dale Ho, probably the expert, an Asian American man, the most prominent voting rights lawyer in the country. I just nominated him to be a district judge. Nina Morrison, open lesbian woman, who was head of the Innocence Project, you know, all the people who were wrongly convicted. So this is going to be a great balance to all those horrible people Trump put on the bench. And I have the record of putting people of color on the bench. Also, for the first time, we have 3 African Americans as US attorneys in the Southern District, Manhattan, the Bronx, and the northern suburbs in Staten Island that you represent, the Eastern District, Breon Peace, and the Western District. Trini Ross is not the first African-American woman. I nominated the first African-American woman to be US attorney. Her name was Loretta Lynch, but the first one in the Western District. I know how Asian American hate crimes have affected your communities. I led the charge to pass the legislation along with Grace Mung to make this happen. And now the Federal Justice Department will have special prosecutors units and pay attention to Asian hate crime. It went way up because Donald Trump, the bigot, horrible human being that he was, is, I guess, let's hope he's never is in the political holding office sense again, so created so much anti-Asian sentiment as well as other bigotry.
Senator, we're at 10 minutes.
Okay,
And-
infrastructure, just infrastructure, I'm going to name money for lead, take away lead pipes, $290 million for bike lanes, money for connecting all our poor people with broadband in the poorer communities who can't afford it, and much more. I'll stop. I have much
Thank you.
more to say, but
No, if you stay for the questions, we're happy as well. Right here in Lower Manhattan, ever-growing numbers of your constituents are raising their voices in support of making 5 World Trade Center, the last remaining undeveloped parcel of land on that public land site, and an entirely affordable residence. Would you be willing to meet with the Coalition for an Affordable World Trade Center to learn how this proposal can be made feasible without siphoning major sources of affordable housing funds from other districts, and while giving first priority to 9/11 survivors and their families and first responders? Question.
yes, I fight for affordable housing. It sounds like a very interesting idea. I will meet.
Thank you. Considering that the distinct possibility of war looms in Europe along the Russian border of Ukraine and Belarus, should future events take us to the point of military action in those areas or elsewhere, will you, as a member of the US Congress, take up the responsibility to control US actions in regard to the War Powers Act, rather than giving an authorization allowing the president a blanket okay without a declaration of war by
Yes.
Congress?
Yes, in fact, I implemented the War Powers Act in 2 instances as majority leader already. I have the right to bring it to the floor. I will do it here again.
So how is it possible for your Republican colleagues to support the big election lie? How can you help restore simple honesty to our government and our society?
This is a great question. And the big lie, by the way, has 2 prongs. Donald Trump started it, and he has a lot of big lies. But by the way, one of the few areas where we had success in messaging, he called it the big steal. And I got all the Democrats to call it the big lie. And now it's out there. That's the word that's used, and that's deserved. That's a deserved word. And why is it that this has spread so? Well, one is that, and this is one of our great weaknesses as Democrats, they have a right-wing media machine that is just incredible, powerful, and omnipresent. And you listen to Fox News, you know, I think Donald Trump has done terrible damage to America, but it was totally exacerbated by people like Sean Hannity and Laura Ingraham and who's the guy with the bow tie, Tucker Carlson, who just tell these lies. They tell the lies about everything. You know, I saw one instance on one of these stations. Hi, my name is Joe Dokes. My vote wasn't counted. Now, there was no evidence of it. The guy clearly had an axe to grind, but that's what they said. So we have to fight back on this. And the big lie led to the insurrection, where, for those of you who don't know, I was within 20 feet of these people. Had one of them had a gun, had 2 of them blocked off the door, who knows where I'd be. One of them was reputed to point at me and say, there's the big Jew, let's get him. You know, bigotry against one is bigotry against all. And, but it also led to all these Republicans legislatures taking away the right to vote to poor people, Black people, young people, people of color, etc. So we just have to constantly fight back against this big lie. It is not believed by Democrats and independents, very small percentage, even a small percentage of independents, but Republicans do believe it. They watch Fox News. And frankly, one of my missions, I'd love us to have a better counter to Fox News. We have, quote, the liberal media, but they're not an organ of the Democratic Party, and they're just as happy to criticize Democrats as Republicans. That's fine. But the bottom line is that they have a right-wing machine that just constantly spreads misinformation and lies. And it should be a big goal of all of us, the president, the Senate, the House, and all Democrats, to come up with a counter to them.
Well, that leads me to my next question perfectly. Don't Look Up is one of the most popular movies that Netflix has right now, and it highlights the problem of climate change denial. What could be done?
Well, this is a place we're trying to make good progress on. The Build Back Better bill that Joe Biden put together had very good goals. I worked hard. Sometimes our progressive groups call on me to put pressure on the state legislature. And when the previous governor was resisting the CLCPA, I think it was then called the New York Green New Deal or something, but now it's called the CLCPA, very bureaucratic. I think it's a silly name. But they called on me to push for it, and I did, and we got it passed in the state. But what the president has proposed in Build Back Better is even stronger. It proposes that 80% of our energy be clean, wind, solar, water, hydro, by 2030, and 50% reduction in the carbon that goes into the air by 2030. We're working hard to get that done. And here's a little bit of a surprise. We're making some progress. Manchin doesn't like some of these things. He's from this coal state, and you know how I feel about that, that issue. But we're making progress that we can still get to the 50-80, and we're going to push hard for it. Obviously, we're going to go back with BBB and keep fighting for it. It's too important to drop. But if we can keep those numbers, it's good. I was even making progress with Manchin on the methane fee, which is one of the, methane is 10 times as bad as carbon in terms of reducing our atmosphere, carbon in the oxygen in the atmosphere. So we have to get something done on climate, and it's essential. And I'm at the forefront of that.
We also have a request from Nancy about the public land under and around the Brooklyn Bridge, a very local issue on the Manhattan side, that there are 9 acres of public land that could be used for open and green space to help with economic revitalization of Chinatown and the seaport, and to connect our diverse and underserved communities. Is it possible for one of your staffers to meet with them?
Yes, I'm for green space. I'm a bike rider. Now, I'm not one of these spandex guys. I'm not going at 40 miles an hour, but I ride my bike all over the city. That's how I relax on many Saturday afternoons. Of course, when I have interviews with very important political clubs, I can't go on my bike ride. But in any, but I wouldn't go today anyway. It's too cold. I'll probably do some kind of walk. But public space is great. And I ride in that area all the time. I ride over I was glad to see they did a bike lane in the Brooklyn Bridge. We provided $290 million in the infrastructure bill for bike, to make New York much more bicycle friendly. So this sounds like a good idea. And again, we'll sit down and meet.
Thank you. Could you give us an update on negotiations for the elimination of the state and local tax cap?
Yes. There is some opposition to it. The House in the BBB bill did pass a proposal that said you could deduct up to 70,000, so the multi-billionaires wouldn't get a deduction, but other people would. There is some in the Senate who feel that's still a little too high, but I believe we will get a good, strong state and local bill if we get a BBB bill, and we're fighting hard to get a BBB bill.
Okay, we have 2 more questions. What, if anything, is the federal government doing to prepare for the continued growth of and flow of money into NFTs, cryptocurrencies, and digital real estate in the coming years?
Yeah, I don't like secrecy, particularly when it comes to finance. It always leads to trouble. So I think we have to look at this very, very carefully. We did pass some limitations on cryptocurrency in the USICA bill, the U.S. International Competitive Act. But it's something that I think the federal government has to look very, very carefully at.
Because some congresspeople and senators appear to be profiting on non-public material information. Would you support a ban on elected officials trading financial instruments?
Stay tuned. I don't want to give away something just on this. Not that you're not important. I'm very sympathetic to it. Let's put it that way, okay?
So Democrats have had many accomplishments this year, but how can they, as you are the leader, how can Democrats control that narrative rather than always playing defense
Well,
that we feel more secure?
Yes, I think one of the things that we did not do a good enough job on is communicating our accomplishments. Somehow we Democrats think people just, when we get something done, everyone knows of it, and they don't. And one of the things I hope to do is sit down with the president and the White House people, Nancy, Speaker Pelosi and her people and my folks, and we should spend much more time messaging the good things that we have done. We have not done enough of that.
And I guess my final question to you is, how can our downtown clubs best use our energy to give you a real Democratic Senate?
I'll give you lists of names. We are in better shape than people think. Our incumbents, we have 4 incumbents who are in relative, who need help. They are Warnock in Georgia, Kelly in Arizona, Cortez Masto in Nevada, and Hassan in New Hampshire. But we're also doing quite well in states like Ohio, Pennsylvania, North Carolina. And guess who's helping us a little bit? Donald Trump, because he's backing all these right-wing crazy candidates in Republican primaries who are probably, more vulnerable. So you should help in all these races. If we would have such a, if we had 2 more senators, can you imagine what we could do? 2 more Democratic senators. 2 more in DC is good too, but I meant just in the 100 we have, 2 more being Democratic.
So anyhow, on behalf of all the clubs, thank you so much for finding the time to be with us today. I know you have a very busy schedule. Don't want to hold you up anymore.
Well, thank you very much. I'm sorry to talk quickly, but I'm from Brooklyn. I guess I'm allowed to do that. In any case, thank you for all your good work. We need you. We need you. And this country is at risk. Our democracy is at risk. And the antidote is just what you're doing, staying active, being concerned. Apathy is our greatest enemy. Tell your constituencies and your friends and everyone, don't give up the fight. We will win the fight if we continue to fight.
Okay, thank you. And to all the club members in the Village Reform Democratic Club, the Village Independent Democratic Club, Downtown Independent Democrats, Grand Street Democrats, United Democratic Organization, CODA, and New Downtown Dems, we thank you very much for joining us today. And to remind everybody that next Saturday, 12 o'clock noon, same time, we'll give you the link, and we'll be doing a gubernatorial panel as well. So thanks again and enjoy your weekends.